Hey guys, today we stand beneath a sky the color of old pewter while rain ticks on a sea of black umbrellas. While a bell tolls from the chapel tower and 100 careful shoes crush wet gravel into the earth, candlelight stains the windows of a mansion that looks as if it can remember every promise ever broken in its rooms. A portrait stares from an upstairs landing, oil paint for eyes, gold leaf for a crown end in the library, a red wax seal waits on a legal envelope like a heart that will not beat until a blade frees it. A nameplate gleams on the coffin. Lilies breathe, and someone's hand will not stop shaking. Breath fogs. Voices fall to whisper. The door closes on the last mourner, and the house holds its breath with them. In this quiet, this presence, this exact minute wealth looks very small, and the truth looks very large. The story opens not with thunder, but with a letter that has been waiting for years to be read aloud. The patriarch is gone. Victor, hail hotel baron, collector of rare clocks, father of perfect photographs, lies among lilies, while his widow, Eleanor, wears composure like armor. The children gather with their careful faces. Adrian, the heir apparent, jaw set. Ceresto to immaculate, a silked ribbon of a woman. Marcus, restless, a tap-tap in his heel that won't stop, and young Leela, eyes wide as the rain. Around them orbit uncles with opinions, aunts with rosaries, cousins who count futures on their fingers. The funeral is precise, as Victor would have wanted, words about legacy and generosity. A hymn sung, just a little sharp but earnest. Handshakes that lasts exactly long enough to mean something and not a second more. The burial shocks, with its finaliter on wood, rain on earth, and a shiver runs along the spine of the crowd like a rumor deciding whether to live or die. They file back into the mansion that has held birthdays and board meetings with the same indifferent marble. In the library, leather spines glow with the oily comfort of books that were bought more for their look than their reading. A clock from Vienna shivers at the half hour. On the long table sits the envelope with the red wax, the Halle sigil pinched into it like a wound. Mr. Harrow, the solicitor, removes his glasses, polishes them as if truth will appear clearer if the lenses are. He is pale from years under lamps, voice like parchment. Mrs. Halle, if the family is ready, he says, and the sentence leaves no room for anyone not called family. They take their places. Eleanor at the head, hands folded, eyes dry as old stone. Adrian beside her, one shoulder already shaped by a throne he believes to be his. Celeste, with ankles crossed, diamonds making small constellations at her ears. Marcus sprawled into a chair the way boys do when they wish to look like men. Leela perched, still holding the program as if it might be a map. Mr. Harrow breaks the seal. It is not dramatic, merely a soft tear and the sigh of wax surrendering. Paper whispers. The room acquires a new gravity. The will begins the way such documents do. Bequests, trusts, foundations, tax-bearing language dressed in velvet. A house in the country for Eleanor to use and enjoy. Shares distributed with an exactness that wants to look like fairness. Scholarships for the hospitality school that bears Victor's name. A painting for a museum. A clock for a friend who loved it almost as much as Victor did. The family breathes in a rhythm of relief. This is the choreography they rehearsed across a decade of Sunday lunches and slow hints. Then Mr. Harrow clears his throat. It is not loud, but it gathers attention the way lightning gathers trees. There is an ad, he says, to be opened after interment and read in the presence of the immediate family. Eleanor's fingers tighten together, a ring digging into bone. Adrian's eyes flick to Celeste's, quick and sharp as knives meeting in air. Marcus stops tapping. Lila's program makes a soft, crumpled sound. The second envelope is plainer, heavier, as if the paper knows it must hold a different weight. Mr. Harrow slides a letter from within, handwritten in a script the children know from birthday cards and instructions left on dining room napkins. "My dear family," he reads, and the words make the room smaller. Victor's voice arrives out of ink, patient, grave. He writes of time, of clocks that refuse to lie, of the way truth keeps its hours, whether or not men care to read them. He writes of the business sits, storms. The nights, he nearly lost it. The mornings, he rebuilt. He writes of love in a tone so formal it nearly forgets what the word means. And then, I make this confession now, because the dead should not ask the living to carry their lies. A breath breaks somewhere Celeste, the necklace lifting and falling with her quick inhale. Marcus swallows. Adrian's knuckles whiten on the arm of the chair. Eleanor does not move. Her stillness has edges. "In my youth," Mr. Harrow continues, and the rain seems to listen, "I loved a woman who was not my wife. Her name was Anna Morales. And from that love a child was born." The word child lands with the softness of cloth and the shock of glass. Someone says no without meaning to give it voice. Lila blinks as if a hallway light has been turned on in her mind. Victor's letter does not apologize, not in the way anyone who never had to beg for anything asks forgiveness. He details a discreet trust established years ago, the careful care of a guardian, the promise broken to himself each time he watched the clocks and did not pick up a phone. He writes a name. This child is Mara. He writes a date of birth that fits like a secret into a past everyone thought they knew. He writes an instruction. Mara Quinn is to be recognized as my daughter and afforded the respect and provision. My name requires respect, provision, daughter. Betrayal turns the air metallic on tongues. Power rearranges itself, invisible but felt like furniture moved in the night. Fear slides into the room on quiet souls. Truth stands up taller than any man here. Eleanor inhales once carefully, as if breath itself is something that might shatter. "How thorough," she says, her voice a steady blade. No one is sure whether she speaks to the corpse who cannot answer or to the lawyer who merely reads. Adrian leans forward. "This is madness," he says, "because denial is a barricade men build when the sea rises. There must be fabrication, coercion. There are records," Mr. Harrow replies. "Banking, legal, and otherwise. The trust is old, the signatures verified." He pauses, lets the room hear its own silence. There are letters. Celeste finds her mouth, and with it, her training. "A discreet matter ought to remain discreet," she says, "each syllable polished. For the sake of the brand, the brand." Marcus repeats, bitterness, bright as citrus. We're a family, not shampoo. Eleanor closes her eyes. When she opens them, they are the color of storm water. We are both, she says softly, and the softness is worse than steel. And now we are something else as well. Mr. Harrow turns another page. There is, in addition, a sum held in escrow contingent upon recognition and introduction. Victor requests that Mara be invited to this house and presented to the family within 30 days of this reading. He looks up. He writes that he hopes she will accept. Hope, in a hand that never trembled when signing men's paychecks. Hope, set beside directives and percentages, like a candle placed on ledgers. The clock from Vienna notes the hour with a small, crystalline strike. Rains in the glass of the library doors. The family can see themselves reflected, multiplied, slightly warped, all their faces in one pane. In that reflection, an absence becomes a space prepared for a person not yet here. Leela speaks first, voice thin and earnest. What if she doesn't want us? She says, and it is a child's question. Dangerous for its honesty. Eleanor's gaze lands on the girl and softens by a fraction. We will discover what she wants. She says, we will do what must be done. Adrian Rizas, the chair legs scrape in, a harsh sound in a room that prefers velvet. What must be done, he repeats, which is not agreement and not refusal, merely a space that will soon be filled with action. Mr. Harrow folds the letter with the tenderness of a man closing a wound he did not make. There is an address, he says, a guardian's name, a phone number that has not changed in years. The portrait above the fireplace, Victor at 50, bronze skin. A watch on his wrist that gleamed like a small moon keeps its painted counsel. The house resumes breathing, slow, deliberate. They stand because there is nothing else to do. A family changes shape in seconds. A name added, a myth cracked, a map redrawn. In the hall, servants listen without admitting it. In the garden, a fountain continues its little music as if water has never learned the word scandal. Outside, the rain stops. Wet stone gleams. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the city moves blind to the tremor running through the Halle estate. Somewhere across that city, a woman named Mara laughs at something small and kind. Not yet knowing, a letter has finally opened and a lock has clicked and a path she did not choose is unfurling toward her door. Truth waits at thresholds. Power holds its breath. Fear sharpens. Betrayal smiles with too many teeth. And in the quiet between 1 hour and the next, the forgotten child's life begins to turn. Mara Quinn lived where the city began to fray into smaller houses, streets patched with tar, corners where lamplight stuttered and then gave up. The Halle estate was another world. Hers was a boarding house that smelled of cabbage and coal, where footsteps on the stairs carried other people's sorrows down into her room. The guardian Victor had chosen, Mrs. Kara, was a woman of strict schedules and tighter purses who fed Mara with discipline rather than tenderness. Mara learned early that silence was safer than questions. She rose before dawn to wash floors, tucked her hair under a scarf, carried her school books like contraband at the public school on Alder Street. She was the girl who spoke only when called upon, who ate her lunch alone by the window. Her classmates forgot her between bell and bell. Teachers marked her papers with the efficiency given to shadows. But shadows endure. In her solitude, Mara became a watcher. She memorized the city like a puzzle, which alleys thawed first in spring, which rooftops turned gold at dusk. She read library books left dusty on lower shelves, novels filled with betrayals, legends filled with children abandoned in forests, histories where names rose and names vanished. She underlined phrases that burned. She whispered them to herself at night, lines to armor a child no one wanted to claim. Sometimes letters came formal, signed by Mr. Harrow, never warm. Provision has been made, the trust remains intact. Continue with your schooling. She read them without expression, folded them, hid them beneath the mattress. She knew they came from the man whose name she carried only on forms, Victor Halle, but she never said that name aloud. What she did carry was a photograph, worn at the corners, its edges soft from years of touch. A woman smiled there, dark hair, pinned eyes, holding the melancholy of secret. Her mother, Ana Morales. Mara had only this picture, kept in a tin box with a ribbon. When she asked Mrs. Carew once, what was she like? The woman snapped the cupboard shut and said, she was trouble enough. That's all. Mara never asked again. Loneliness cut, but it also forged. By 12, Mara could cook. So, repair the loose hinge on her window. By 15, she had the patience to stand in line for hours at the employment office, taking any shift that paid coins enough for paper and ink. She wrote stories in the margins of old ledgers dailies of daughters who returned, who claimed thrones, who spoke truth until it rang louder than bells. The world never noticed her birthdays. No candles, no gifts, just another morning with porridge too thin. But each year she marked the wall with a careful line. Each year she told herself, I am still here. In the evenings, when the boarding house quieted and Mrs. Carew's snores rasped through the wall, Mara would stand at her window. The city lights stretched distant as constellations, and among them she imagined the mansion she had never seen. She wondered if its halls remembered footsteps like hers. She wondered if the clocks there ticked any louder than her own heart. And though she did not know it yet, a letter was already traveling across the city, a letter that would name her, a letter that would tear her from the shadows. Asterisk, the Halle mansion smelled of polish and roses, a fragrance both inviting and suffocating. Mara paused at the iron gates, clutching the strap of her worn satchel, staring at the house she had only imagined in her nights of hunger and curiosity. The letter from Mr. Harrow was folded in her pocket like a summons from another world. Inside, marble floors echoed every step. Chandeliers scattered light across portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge her already. Servants eyed her with curiosity that slipped quickly into obedience. Miss Mara Quinn, one whispered, as though the syllables might fracture. In the drawing room, the family awaited her. Eleanor Halle sat rigid, pearls at her throat, lips pressed thin. Adrian, the eldest, stood beside her with hands clasped behind his back, every line of his body rehearsed for power. Celeste inspected Mara as one inspects fabric at a market, eyes sharp and dismissive. Marcus leaned against the mantel, smirking, restless even in disdain, and young Leela peered shyly, fingers twisting a ribbon not yet hardened into cruelty. Mara bowed her head, uncertain of any protocol. "Thank you for inviting me." Her voice carried the tremor of someone aware she did not belong. Adrian's laugh was short, unkind, inviting. "You were dragged here by ink and law, not family." Celeste's smile held the polish of ice. "You must understand, appearances matter." Father was indiscreet. "It is unfortunate you must live with the consequences." Marcus shrugged. "At least she's interesting. We've been boring ourselves for years." Eleanor silenced them with a glance. Her gaze lingered on Mara, not maternal, not cruel, but measuring as if she were a painting whose authenticity remained in doubt. "You will stay in the East Wing," she said finally. "You will eat at the table. You will comport yourself with dignity, and you will remember you are here by your father's command, not by our desire." The air tightened. Mara lowered her eyes, but inside something pressed against her ribs a mix of fear and anger. She wanted to say she had never asked for this, that she had lived without them and could continue. Yet here she was, standing in shoes that pinched, under chandeliers that glittered with wealth stolen from her silence. That night, her room in the East Wing felt too large, too gilded. The bed swallowed her. The wallpaper bloomed with golden vines. She held her mother's photograph under the lamplight, whispering, "What would you tell me to do?" Through the window, she saw the city lights. She knew, distant now, fragile against the darkness. In this new house, every wall hummed with secrets. Every clock ticked as if waiting for her to fail. The morning made its expectations known in silver and crystal. Breakfast arrived on a table long enough to confuse conversation. A regiment of porcelain eggs, soldiers of toast, a small army of spoons, each with a private purpose. Mara sat where a footman indicated 3 chairs down from Eleanor, directly across from Adrian, aware of the way sunlight struck the cut glass and scattered into her eyes. "Pass the salt," Celeste said, not looking at her. It was not a request. Mara reached for the nearest shaker and learned, with a dozen lifted eyebrows, that there was a correct salt and an incorrect salt, and she had chosen the wrong one. A small thing, a sharp lesson. She set it down gently. Her hand looked brown against the white cloth. Adrian buttered toast with the concentration of a surgeon. "You'll find," he said, tone pleasant and cold, "that our life is simple when one respects order." Marcus snorted. "She's not a grenade aid. She's a person. Or do we not do people at breakfast?" Eleanor's glance was a gavel. Silence complied. Leela, at the far end, whispered to her napkin, eyes darting to Mara like a sparrow considering the open air and the cat. Afterward came a Celeste's idea. It wound like a test through galleries and corridors, portraits and tapestries, marble nymphs and bronze generals. Celeste's voice slid over dates and donors. Marcus supplied irreverent footnotes. Adrian corrected both when their facts disobeyed. Mara walked beside the shadow of herself, answering only when asked, naming a painter she knew from library books, and earning a lift of Adrian's eyebrow that said, "Lucky guess." At the landing, a portrait of Victor at 35 stared at her. as if waiting for her to blink first. She did not dot in the garden. The siblings arranged themselves like a tableau across steps and stone. Celeste lit the air with a laugh. "We're having a small luncheon Sunday," she said, "for the trust board. Wear something a glance, cool from shoes to hair." "Appropriate, appropriate," Marcus echoed. "Not the apocalypse. We've done enough of those." Eleanor folded her hands. "Mara will be prepared," she said, which sounded like a verdict instead of care. Adrian's phone chimed. Power cold. He left without apology. The next afternoon, the estate's tennis courts glittered under a thin blue sky. Celeste, in white so crisp it could cut, pressed a spare racket into Mara's hand. "You'll be fine," she said, warm the way winter sun is warm. "Just return what you can." Marcus served with effort disguised as ease. The ball arrived like a bright accusation. Mara swung. It kissed the net and died. Laughter slid from the fence where friends lounged, cousins, colleagues. A camera in every pocket. She tried again. Missed. Again. A scattered clap when she finally lobbed one over. Too high, too gentle, a gift for Celeste to murder at Mara's feet. "Brave," Celeste said, smile glossy. "Bravery is charming, right? Up until it ruins the party." "Enough," Marcus said, but he was grinning. Competition was oxygen. He sent another shot. The racket bit Mara's bum. The strings hummed a little pain. She tasted iron and did not know whether it was blood or the word rage swallowing its vowels. From the house. A bell? Tea? Everyone turned. Mara lingered a moment by the baseline. Breathing. The court's white lines ordered what her life could not. She closed her eyes, opened them, walked back, carrying the racket carefully, as if it were evidence, and she the only witness willing to tell the truth. Sunday found the mansion. Staged to impress, florists had transformed hallways into neat wilderness. A harp made a room seem kinder than it was. The board of the trust arrived all at once, men with voices that assumed microphones loved them, women with wrists that flashed foundations in diamonds. Eleanor moved among them, governance concealed in grace. Adrian shook hands with a pressure calibrated to promise success. Celeste placed air kisses and received allegiance dressed as admiration. Marcus performed charm like a dare. Mara waited at the foot of the stairs until a maid appeared with a dress in a garment bag. "Ms.," she said, eyes carefully not meeting. "Mara's?" In her room, the fabric gleamed. It was beautiful. It was also half a size too small. She tried anyway. Breath shallow, zipper protesting at the delicate blade of her shoulder blades. In the mirror, the dress looked possible if she held still as a portrait. She pinned her hair with trembling fingers and walked tall and slow to the gallery where introductions would be made. They turned toward her like sunflowers pivoting by instinct. Eleanor's hand requested silence. "Our family," she said, "has the honor of welcoming a pause as brief as a cut Mara Quinn." Murmurs, some sympathetic, some calculating. One woman smiled as if at a dog that had learned a difficult trick. Adrian's mouth made a shape that implied magnanimity without conceding an inch of ground. Celeste's chin dipped, the smallest degree and returned to altitude. Marcus raised his glass to his own reflection in the window and then, unexpectedly, to Mara. Dora Trustee asked a question about her studies, another about her interests. She answered in a voice steady enough, naming books, nights at the public library, mornings that began before light. Work teaches, she said. I would like to be useful. The sentence hung, sincere and vulnerable. For a heartbeat, the room softened. Then someone's sleeve knocked a flute. Champagne fell in a cold gold arc across Mara's shoulder and breast. The dress drank it. The seam at her side strained past. Kindness gave with a soft sigh that felt louder than the harp. A gasp fanned through the gathering like wind across wheat. Celeste's hand found a napkin too late to be helpful. Adrian's eyes flickered with something like satisfaction, hurriedly disguised as concern. Mara did not run. She set her glass on a side table, lifted her chin, and said, "Excuse me," as if she were the hostess and a tray required her attention. In the powder room, she locked the door, pressed her palms flat to the cool marble. Her reflection was a stranger champagne glitter in hair, a wound of fabric at her side like a smile that had learned to lie, a small, frightened knock. "It's only me," Leela whispered. When Mara opened the door a sliver, the girl slid through, ribbons trembling. She held out a sewing kit with both hands. "I keep one," she said, cheeks pink with the effort of courage, "for when Celeste's dresses do things." Mara stared, then laughed, once low, astonished, almost breaking. "Thank you." Lila stood guard while Mara stitched a tidy line in the lining, improvising from library lessons and the memory of mending Mrs. Caro's sleeves. They worked quickly. Lila's small fingers found and held, then let go without asking for more. "Will it hurt?" Leela asked suddenly, not meaning the needle. Her eyes were old for a moment. "Yes," Mara said, tying the last knot. Honesty was the only luxury she could afford. But not forever. Back in the gallery, nothing had happened and everything had. The harpist continued weaving a gentleness over cement. People half smiled, pretending not to be hungry for spectacle. Mara walked to Eleanor first. "Forgive the interruption," she said, and found that her voice was stronger now, lower. "Clear," Eleanor studied her as if reading a weather report. "Wind, rain, cold front, moving in. Compose yourself," she murmured. Then, softer, almost human, "Well done." It should have ended there. Enough humiliation for one day. But Marcus, intoxicated by attention and by his own nature, suggested a tour of the stables to some of the board members whose shoes had never met mud. Laughter and novelty carried the party outside. Celesto looped her arm in Mara's as if sisterhood were a bracelet she could clasp and unclasp at will. "Do ride," she said sweetly. "Hera is very gentle. She does not mind nerves." Hera was a long, clever horse with a philosopher's gaze. Mara laid a hand on the warm neck, breathed the deep animal calm. In another life, she would have said no. In this one, refusal would become prophecy. They'd repeat, "Can't, won't, doesn't belong." She put a foot in the stirrup. Hera accepted her. For 2 laps, the courtyard held its breath as the girl who grew up under broken streetlights went around and around beneath chandeliers of sky. On the third, someone clapped premature applause. Hera startled. Her shoulder moved one way. Mara's balance moved another. She fell in silence, the kind that follows an intake of breath you cannot spare. Stone accepted her with indifference. Pain spoke bright behind her ribs. The world leaned into sea. Dachi rose, dress dusty, palm scraped, mouth a flat line stamped with resolve. She is gentle, Mara said, more to the horse than to the people. She patted Hera once and stepped back from the stirrup. I will try again when she forgives my clumsiness. It was not a triumph. It was something cleaner. A refusal to break publicly on anyone's schedule but her own. That night, in the East Wing, the bed no longer felt like a trap but like a field she might cross with care. She laid the sewing kit on the nightstand where the lamp could see it, a small promise to herself. She placed Aina's photograph beside it. The face in the picture seemed less distant now, as if a mile or two of dignity had been walked and measured down the corridor. Laughter faltered, then faded. Somewhere a clock declared the hour in a voice that believed in order. Mara closed her eyes. She could still feel the animal heat of Hera, the slick cold of champagne, Lila's trembling bravery in her hand. Betrayal had many faces. Power wore many perfumes. Fear was a thin film that lifted when one remembered to breathe. Truth, it waited, patient as a door unlocked from the other side. Asterisk, in the dark, the mansion shifted softly, old timbers easing into night. The forgotten child lay awake, learning the shape of a new kind of pain. And the first strength that answers it, asterisk, the mansion wore masks as easily as its heirs. Behind carved doors and velvet drapes, gossip sharpened itself like blades. Mara felt it daily, glances that measured, laughter that cut. Silence is more brutal than words. Adrian orchestrated much of it at dinners. He praised her faintly for trivialities. How quaint that you've read Dickens, in tones that dismissed the rest of her mind. In corridors, his allies echoed him. At the stables, the grooms muttered new orders, always less convenient when Mara asked for Hera. The world obeyed Adrian's hand because he had been raised to expect obedience. Celeste turned cruelty into elegance. She corrected Mara's posture at the piano before guests, guiding her fingers with a smile meant to humiliate. She forgot to mention a dress code until Mara entered a room overdressed or under. Oh, darling, you look unique, she would say, each word glazed in condescension. Marcus played both sides. Sometimes he defended Mara with a lazy grin, as if the game amused him more when she stayed in play. Other times, he joined the mockery, his laughter sharper than Celeste's. He was unpredictable, dangerous not from malice, but from boredom. Only Leela seemed different. She lingered near Mara with the tentative devotion of a bird that wanted to land. Once, in the library, she whispered, "I'm glad you're here," then darted away before her courage betrayed her. That fragile kindness burned in Mara's heart like a candle cupped against wind. Among the servants, too, she found unlikely allies. Old Mr. Sutter, the butler, spoke softly when he showed her which fork to use, saving her embarrassment at table. Clara, a maid with Clever hands offered spare hairpins before gatherings. Their help was quiet, invisible. They risked more than they gained, but their gestures told Mara she was not entirely alone. One evening, wandering the east wing, she discovered a locked room. The key turned azully forgotten, perhaps, and inside lay trunks thick with dust. She opened one and found letters bound in ribbon, pages yellowed, ink fading. They bore her mother's name. Ana Morales had written of love and despair, words hidden in drawers where Victor must have kept them. They will never forgive me. One read, but you are worth every silence I endure. Another, I watch her sleep and know she deserves more than shadows. Mara traced the strokes of the pen with trembling fingers, feeling her mother's voice alive again in her hands. She carried the bundle back to her room, hid it beneath floorboards, and wept into the pillow. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to carry sorrow alone for so long. In those pages, she found the truth her guardians had never told her. Her mother had not abandoned her. She had been erased. And now, in this house of masks, Mara felt the ghosts of her mother urging her forward. Betrayal cut deeper. Fear spread wider. But power shifted slightly, quietly, in the dark. The mansion had many ghosts, but none more potent than the one carried in whispers Ana Morales. Mara felt her presence in every letter she had unearthed, each ink-stained confession of love and despair. The more she read, the sharper the portrait became. A woman full of fire, silenced by betrayal, erased by deliberate cruelty. In the quiet of her room, Mara pieced together the fragments. Ina had not been a secret by accident. She had been hidden by design. Eleanor must have known. Adrian and Celeste must have grown up with hints, at least. The truth was not invisible, it had been buried. One evening, she dared to ask Clara, the maid, "Did anyone here know her?" "My mother." Clara froze, duster still in hand. For a moment the young woman looked as if the walls themselves might be listening. "Finally," she whispered. "Some of us remember." She smiled at the staff. She made this house less heavy, and then one day she was gone. Clara's eyes darted to the door. "I shouldn't say more." But it was enough. Mara began to imagine her mother walking these corridors, the same marble beneath her feet, perhaps pausing at the same window where Mara now paused. Watching gardens bathe in moonlight. She pressed further, searching. In the archives room, a chamber of old ledgers and yellowed newspapers, she found a clipping. Victor Halle and companion attend charity ball. The photograph had been cropped in the public edition, but the original lay, and there was Anna, her hand resting lightly on Victor's sleeve, her eyes betraying both joy and dread. The revelation inflamed Mara's nights. Betrayal was larger than her father's silence. It had been systemic, a conspiracy of omission. To erase Anna was to erase Mara too. She now understood why her life had been built in shadows. One night, sitting at her desk with the letters spread before her, she whispered into the quiet, "They erased you, but they won't erase me." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of a vow. The next morning, she walked into breakfast with her head higher, her gaze steadier. Adrian noticed, eyes narrowing. Celeste masked her unease with chatter. Marcus smirked as if sensing a new game. And Eleanor, for the briefest second, glanced at Mara with something that looked like ghosts of her rivals staring back at her. Fear shifted in the house that day. Truth was beginning to speak again. And Mara, the forgotten child, was listening. Adrian smiled with the calm of a man born behind a locked door. His suits fit like decisions. His voice never rose. His cruelty arrived on linen. He had watched Mara walk straighter at breakfast, had watched the ghosts of Anna Morales tilt the angle of the room. And in that subtle shift, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel. He named it strategy and moved to kill its source. He began with the small, invisible cuts that wealth makes look like weather. A word to the head of household accounts tightened the access to petty cash, and suddenly Clara could no longer procure a simple spool of silk without signatures. And when Mara asked for materials to alter a dress, the requisition took a week, and when it came, it was the wrong color. A word to the stable master for safety, restrict Hera to family riders, and a laminated card appeared with rules no one had ever seen before. Rules that named Mara without using her name. A word to the kitchen food sensitivities, murmured to a chef, and the menu leaned toward dishes Mara had never learned to eat in the boarding house, the kind that condescend in sauce. Then he moved outward. He invited trustees to late lunches that ended right before their next meeting. Glasses always refilled one time too many, and as he walked them to their cars, he told a curated set of truths. "She is earnest," he said, and the word meant naive. "She is unfamiliar with our ways," and the sentence meant unfit. "She is intense," and the tone meant unstable. He let silence do the last third of the work. Silence is the accomplice of men like Adrian. Rumors took the staircase 2 at a time. The city paper's society page editors, who owed him a favor on a paragraph. Between photographs of a gala and a charity luncheon, the Hale family welcomes a previously undisclosed relation. Sources say adjustment has been challenging. The word challenging does what a knife does when it doesn't want to stain the carpet. Inside the house, the choreography deepened. A brooch of Eleanor's went missing after a tea. Not just any brooch, the one Victor gave their mother after her first board victory. Celeste noticed first, and, flying to the hollow of her throat with artful shock, Adrian said nothing for a beat, and then everything at once. "Nothing leaves this room," he told the staff, which guaranteed that everything would. Someone remembered that Mara had stood near the vitrine. Someone remembered incorrectly that Mara had touched it. Someone remembered with thrilling clarity that Mara had been alone here once. Eleanor did not accuse. She did not need to. She placed the empty velvet tray back in its glass house and instructed Mr. Sutter to review the security footage. The cameras had been down for maintenance during that hour. IT apologized competently. Adrian sent flowers to IT the next morning. At dinner, he lifted his glass to no one in particular. "Property teaches us," he said, with a pleasantness that sounded like a closing door. "It reminds us what is ours because we have held it so long." Marcus rolled his eyes. "You speak in plaques now. Are we to hang you in bronze?" "Respect," Adrian replied, smiling, "is the plaque we hang inside the heart. When it falls, so does the house." He did not look at Mara when he said house. He did not need to. The next day, An envelope appeared at the reception desk of Hale Foundation headquarters, stamped with no return address, containing photocopies of boarding house bills. A guardian scrawled notes about discipline problems. A school report that was correct except for the comments, which had been altered: disruptive in class, argumentative with authority, prone to dramatic outbursts. The assistant who opened it had been hired by Adrian. She forwarded the file to Human Resources with a cover email that read, "Context re Ms. Quinn." Mr. Harrow noticed. He always noticed paper. He requested a meeting with Adrian in the library, where the clock from Vienna counted each second as if it were billing hours. "I am receiving materials," the solicitor said, placing the copies on the table. "Curious timing." "Diligensu?" Adrian replied, hands palm up, as if he had nothing to hide. "A family of our stature must guard against scams. You know how men try to attach themselves posthumously to fortunes." Father's sentiment was admirable. "My caution is necessary." Victor's sentiment, Mr. Harrow said, and the misuse of the man's first name in this room sounded like treason to both of them, was instruction, recognition, and provision. "And mine," Adrian said, "is stewardship. We do not let the brand bleed." The solicitor studied him as if measuring the worth of a bond. "The brand," he echoed softly, and the echo did not sound like agreement. He gathered the papers again. "Truth is not a brand, Mr. Hale. It is a balance sheet that does not tolerate fictitious assets." Adrian's smile did not move. "Everything tolerates the correct presentation." He left the conversation in a cloud of refined civility and went hunting data. He had a man. Men like him always have a mankind with a laptop and a vocabulary of rot. Screens glow in cheap apartments far from marble. Screens do what rope once did. Within a week, a social account that belonged to no one and therefore belonged to anyone began to post photographs of a girl who looked like Mara, half turned, in places she had never been. A caption with 3 barbed words, "Not Hale material." Comments fell like hailstones. Some of the cousins clicked hearts. Celeste did not click anything. Her silence kept her hands clean. Marcus clicked, then unclicked, then broke his phones. Case against a doorjamb. He would later claim he did not see. The servants felt the weather change first. A chill down corridors, a tightening of instructions. Clara was reassigned to the West Wing for a week. Mr. Sutter's keys were audited and 3 disappeared from his ring with an apology from security about the East Wing felt farther away. Mara endured what the forgotten always endure, the suspicion that grows out of air. A trustee glanced at her wrists when she passed, as if thieves wear their crime like perfume. A florist joked too loudly about peonies going missing. Leela found Mara in the music room and pressed her small hand to Mara's sleeve. "I know you didn't," she said, and those 4 words broke and mended. Something in the same second. Eleanor watched in stillness that looked like marble but was not. She asked Adrian no questions because she already knew the answers he would give. She asked herself a different question: whether the war she had waged against Ana Morales years ago had ended or merely changed generals. That night she lay awake, pearls on the nightstand like little moons, and admitted to the ceiling, to the dark, that shame is not a virtue if it makes a woman cruel to a child. Adrian escalated. "That is the mathematics of men who fear power slipping. The more they lose, the more they take. He arranged a charity preview at the gallery downtown, invited donors who preferred their art with a scent of gossip, and ensured Mara received a printed card that read, "Dress, daring." Celeste received a card that read, "Black tie, classic." The room noticed, cameras noticed, the resulting photographs Mara in color among a sea of black appeared online with captions that did not need verbs to wound. When she returned home, the security team asked to see her satchel. "Policy," they said. She opened it. Inside, a silver letter opener with the Halle crest engraved, an object she had never seen, now suddenly hers. The policymen frowned the way men frowned when paid. Mr. Sutter arrived before the official form could be completed. He lifted the opener, weighed it, and shook his head once. "This belongs in the study," he said mildly. "You have misshelved it." He slid it into his pocket and dismissed the policy with the authority of a man who has polished these floors since Adrian was a child learning how to lie. Later, in the pantry, Clara cried without noise and pressed a linen to Mara's bleeding palm where the zipper had bitten. "He's trying to make you leave," she whispered. "I know," Mara said, and the calm in her voice surprised them both. "He believes that absence, it only sharpens the outline." She began to watch Adrian with the precision of a clockmaker. When did he look away? For whom did he hold doors? Which hands did he not shake? She learned his tells. The way he touched his cufflinks when lying, the way his mouth smoothed when planning harm. Truth is not only a document, sometimes it is a pattern. One afternoon she lingered near the library as voices drifted out, Adrian and Celeste speaking in the soft tones of conspirators who believe silk muffles sin. "The codicil," Celeste murmured. "Father was never careless. He was sentimental," Adrian replied. "Sentiment writes checks. I sign them. What if then Harrow meets retirement? The law is a language. I am fluent." Mara stood very still. A girl again. In the boarding house hallway, eavesdropping on the world that would not say her name. Codicil, not careless. The words bruised as they passed. She inhaled and let them settle. Betrayal, fear, power, truth. She lined them up like chessmen and resolved to learn how each moved. That evening, she returned the sewing kit to the nightstand and slid Anna's letters from beneath the floorboard. She read until the house slept, until even the clocks soft their insistence. In a sentence near the end of a page that had once been splashed with rain, Anna had written, "He promised to keep something safe where only he would dare to look." Mara stared at that line until it glowed. Adrian believed the house was his. Good. Let him underestimate the quiet girl who survived boarding houses and salt shakers and horses in rooms designed to make her small. Let him build a theater of lies large enough to hold all his guests. She would find the real thing he feared. And when she did, the mask of the air would crack, not with a shout, but with the soft, unmistakable sound of truth taking its breath. Mara's search became a ritual. Each night, when the house surrendered to sleep, she lit the small lamp in her east wing room and spread Anna's letters across the quilt. She traced the loops of her mother's script, hunting for clues, piecing together a map of love and betrayal. And then there it was, a line Esley overlooked, a promise almost casual. He said he would keep it safe where no one dares to look, among the hands of time. Clocks. Victor Hallé had collected them, obsessively grandfather clocks taller than men, mantel clocks that chimed like choirs, delicate Swiss pieces ticking in glass domes. Every hall of the mansion bore his obsession. Adrian hated them. He called them clutter. But Victor had adored them, and Aina's note made the gears in Mara's mind turn. She began to walk the house slowly, listening. One midnight, guided by intuition more than knowledge, she found herself before the Vienna clock in the library. It loomed against the wall, its pendulum swinging like a solemn heartbeat. She pressed along the carved wood, fingers searching. A panel shifted. Behind it, a compartment. Inside, a sealed envelope yellowed with years, stamped in Victor's own hand. Heart hammering, she carried it to her room and broke the seal. Inside was a copy of a codicillan amendment to Victor's will. The words trembled under her eyes. In addition to all provisions, I name my daughter Mara Quinn, rightful heir to 1/3 of my estate, to be recognized equally with my other children. It was dated, notarized, signed. Undeniable tears stung her eyes, but they were not of sorrow. They were the fire of vindication. Her mother had been right. Victor had left her more than a name. He had left her proof. The next morning, Adrian noticed her calmness and grew restless. He tried to corner her in the conservatory, voice low with venom. You don't belong here. Every smile you wear, every step you take is borrowed. Mara looked him in the eye for the first time. Then it's a debt already paid. Adoriang. 네. Adoriang faltered only for a breath, but it was enough. Mara turned and walked away, the codicil hidden close to her heart. Truth was no longer a dream. It was paper, ink, signature. It was power waiting for the right moment to speak. The day of reckoning arrived not with thunder, but with ceremony. The family gathered in the grand hall where portraits of Hales passed, looked down, judgment in oil and guilt. Trustees filled the seats, society's eyes gleamed, and Eleanor presided like a queen in exile, regal in black silk. Adrian stood tall beside her, calm and rehearsed, ready to present his narrative. Mara as mistake, inconvenience a shadow. Mara entered slowly, every step deliberate. She carried no allies visible, no armor but her resolve, yet inside her dress, against her skin, lay the codicilla truth sharper than any blade. Adrian began smoothly. He spoke of stability, of heritage, of the need for discretion in a world hungry for scandal. He hinted at Mara's struggles adjusting, at the embarrassments as she had caused, never naming them but allowing every guest to imagine. The room nodded. Adrian's voice was polished marble. When he finished, silence waited for Mara to collapse under its weight. Instead, she stepped forward. Her hands did not tremble. You have all heard his story, she said, her voice low, steady. Now you will hear my father's. She drew the envelope, placed it on the oak table, and slid it toward Mr. Harrow. He adjusted his glasses, broke the seal, read. The words filled the room with a power even Adrian could not silence. Victor Hale's unmistakable hand naming Mara Quinn, his daughter, and heir, equal in blood, equal in right. Gasps rippled. Celeste paled. Marcus swore softly. Leela sat taller, as if vindicated. Eleanor closed her eyes. Face unreadable, but her hand tightened on her chair as though bracing against a storm long foreseen. Adrian tried to protest forgery, manipulation, impossible. But Mr. Harrow raised the document like a shield. Signed, witnessed, notarized, legal, binding. The hall's silence became verdict. For the first time, Mara stood not as intruder, but as truth embodied. Betrayal was unmasked. Fear was scattered, and power at last shifted. She did not gloat. She did not weep. She simply stood tall. Aina's daughter, Victor's heir, the forgotten child no longer forgotten. The house slowly exhaled its centuries of secrets. The portraits watched as though relieved of their duty. The storm that had raged in every whisper, in every stare, in every silence, began to fade. Mara walked through the halls, not as shadow, but as presence. Servants met her gaze without flinching. Trustees offered hands, careful but respectful. Even Marcus, for once, gave her a look that carried no smirk, only acknowledgement. She returned to the East Wing that night and laid Anna's letters on the bed. The words no longer burned. They glowed with comfort. Her mother had been erased, yes, but never defeated, and now neither was she. The mansion was still dangerous, still filled with jealous hearts and calculating minds. Adrian would not surrender easily. Celeste would not forgive humiliation. Eleanor's silence was heavy with history, but for tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight the clocks in every corridor chimed not with dread, but with belonging. Mara opened her window. The city stretched outward, lights glimmering like promises. She breathed slowly, deeply. For the first time, she did not feel small. She felt whole. The forgotten child had risen. She carried scars, but also strength. She carried betrayal, but also truth. And as she lay down to rest, her heart beat steady with the knowledge that she had reclaimed her name, her place, her story. Sleep drifted over her gently. The night folded around the house like a calm embrace. And in that stillness, Mara finally whispered to herself the words she had waited her whole life to say, "I am not forgotten."